Hi everyone, welcome. I'm about to check in on my VermiBag Tote. The VermiBag Tote is the system where I'm running what I refer to as a mixed variety of worms. So the mix includes what's abbreviated here as RW, red wigglers, what's abbreviated as ENC, European night crawlers, and blue worms. And this bin over here is populated with the worms that had previously lived, as it just so happens, in this container right here. I didn't really notice it till now, but you can see that this so-called cocoon nursery, it even says that it's a batch of cocoons from the mixed batch of worms. You can see it's got the same starting date as this worm bin over here. So really all I did was hang on to their castings, try to nurture the container so that maybe babies will be born and can get rounded up. And I actually did an extraction, my first extraction of babies out of this system here, and move the worms over into the main bin, reuniting the babies with their families. And I think this system will go maybe a few more days before it's done, getting the last of the babies out of there. And then the only little batch of worms missing from this original group here are those worms that are living right down in here in my time-lapse system. You can see the camera just snapped a photo of the container. The worms that occupy this container were recruited for this job a day prior to the migration of the worms into the VermiBag Tote. So it seems to me like after 70 days here and 69 days in the worm bin, or in the worm bag at this point, the time has come for a reunion, I believe, soon. Because the cocoon nursery is going to be done soon, the time lapse will be done soon, and then all the worms will be reunited in the VermiBag Tote. So let's get on to feeding these little guys. 10 days have passed since our last check-in on this bag, at which time we fed in a fashion that we described to ourselves as a bedding bonanza. And it was even in the prior feeding to that. So there was 10 days ago and there was 8 days interval between those two feedings. On both occasions, I think we classified the feeding as being one in which we were very generous with the bedding. Last time too, we kind of consolidated things too. We had a variety of different coverings. There was a piece of paper just floating out on top that we ended up tearing up and using as bedding down within the system. We had oddball pieces of bubble wrap out here, and we consolidated down to that piece of red plastic bag that we just removed. Even these pieces of cardboard were placed in here new only 10 days ago during the last check-in. So we've simplified things in here, reduced the clutter. And what we've got in the middle is a pretty good sized mound. I guess it's because we were in bedding bonanza mode. So perhaps we really needed to, use a lot of material in order to get the feeding covered up somewhat. From what I remember, yeah, I did skim through the video quickly, so it's coming back to me now. I did create numerous layers. So that bag, for example, I had like a paper bag, I think it was, paper bag material that had been just sitting idly out on the top of the bin. I had taken that and torn it up into little pieces and shredded it into bits to be used down here in the feeding area. This stuff over here might be that. Yeah, it looks like it, right? I had dropped in coffee like we're going to drop in today. I dropped in grit, as you can see some remnants of over here. This banana peel might have even gone in a week ago or 10 days ago at this point. I'm trying to remember what the feedings were. I did review the footage briefly from last time, but sometimes it just evades me. I think maybe I was more tuned into trying to get a sense of how damp or dry the system was last time, because I do remember we added a good amount of moisture to this. And I've got my spray pump all set to go here, should we decide we want to do it again. This thing being a fabric container does allow a little bit of its moisture to be lost out through the walls of the container. And even though I'm running this thing within a plastic tub, there's still a good amount of airflow that comes and goes right by the container. Like here, I guess, perhaps on these two edges. It feels pretty damp on this side because the bag is resting against the plastic. Same over here, but I guess over here it seems like this whole edge does not rest against the plastic that's behind it, and there it allows for a good amount of airflow, I suppose, and drying and evaporation. That's okay. We'll have to deal with it. Luckily, the plastic covering keeps the rest of the container pretty stable as far as holding on to its existing moisture. Even though it has a pretty good capability of holding on to its moisture, as you can see, there are parts of it that are pretty dry. So I am wondering if maybe we'll want to do another spray down today. Alright, I've just collected a number of things here, you know, it's like banana peels, leftover bedding from the last feeding. It does seem like we've got a good bit of stuff in here that could get recycled. And, you know, yesterday, was it yesterday? Well, the other day when I bought over babies from the cocoon nursery, I didn't really go to any extent to examine this container. I just pretty much opened it up and dropped in the babies that were getting put in here, and then I zipped it right back up, and for some reason I didn't think I'd be back in here so quickly. I didn't realize it was the next system to be fed on my schedule anyway. Perhaps I could have just taken care of feeding it then. That's okay. It's a good thing I've got a tracking spreadsheet, because otherwise I'd lose track of what's going on here. I see a lot of other people keeping track of their systems in so many different ways. For me, it seems like having a spreadsheet's a good way to do it. Because I also like kind of reflecting back on the information that I glean from my record keeping too. You know, it simply does quick calculations on the number of days that have elapsed between particular dates for me, so I could just glance on my spreadsheet and see really quickly how many days have passed since each of my bins was last fed. Stuff like that. It counts the feedings I've applied to each system, so it keeps a tally on how many feedings each system's received so far and stuff like that. So that's kind of the magic of a spreadsheet, to be able to, you know, not only store a bunch of information, but have it calculate all kinds of interesting stuff for you too, using that information. So I've created a nice big gap here. It's I guess it's just my impulse these days to be the candy man when it comes to bedding in my systems. And I was kind of envisioning maybe dropping a little bit more in today. And, you know, maybe not as much as we've done in the past. Perhaps we should back away from the bedding bonanza stuff. Although it does seem like the worms seem to like it, I think. Ugh, decisions. Do I go big on bedding? This is feeding number 9 for this 69-day-old bin. And, you know, I've still got a ways to go before the system would be done. So there's certainly time for bedding added today to get broken down by harvest time, whatever that may be. Assuming that we're probably only about halfway through this system's life cycle at this point. Or maybe just slightly beyond it, but yeah, you know what? What the heck? Maybe this will be our bedding bonanza bin. I've got little gimmicky feedings going on in a lot of my bins, so why don't we adopt that theory or game plan for this one. I got these so-called pocket feedings going on in one of my systems. I'm, you know, changing the pocket or the corner that I feed in each time. I got these interesting layered style feedings where the feedings are placed into the system in little layers and stuff like that. So we got all kinds of weird things going on in all my systems. The only thing that was novel about this system was the fact that it's in a VermiBag. So maybe bedding bonanza is the theme for this one, now that we've already done it anyway for a few weeks. Maybe we'll just keep going with it. So I guess combining some of this fresh bedding we just placed in here, that paper towel, with some of this leftover food and reused bedding, start bringing in some more of this stuff that we bought down for them. Just emptied a whole coffee filter into here, so we've got a nice fresh coffee filter, additional bedding. A lot of times I'll want to do this. I'll go grab this one that was draped out across the top and use it down in the feeding, and And then we'll just get a nice fresh one to go out onto the top surface. This one that's already been kind of steeping here in the system for a while, at least 10 days, maybe longer. It'll be nice to put it down into a place where it'll get even more attention than if it's just draped out across the top surface. So a little bit of coffee, but it almost seems like the feeding here is almost virtually all bedding. Paper, hey, you want some more paper? I got more paper. Whatever, let's start giving them a little bit of variety here. I bought home one of these frozen pizzas and was thinking that, hey, maybe I'll not eat the crusts. A lot of times I'll eat the crusts, but somehow they, kind of went a little bit overboard. A lot of bread here, so while I like the crust on pizzas, I'm not really like into the really huge rising crust, which this one was, but it had so many good looking toppings and the price was right. It was a good pizza in the end. So in that same vein, I've got some other stuff here which I usually don't use very much. In the process of breading some meat the other day, I found myself with some leftover flour, so I figured maybe I'd give it to the worms. So I've got a little bit more in here. I thought I'd try to combine it with other things as opposed to just dumping it in. I think I see people feeding powdery type foods like worm chows and things like this, but they always sort of blend it in. And I guess blending in has been kind of a theme in my feedings lately too. It does seem like if stuff is sort of, scattered about and mixed together, it just seems to get a lot more activity and attention from the worms. This way the stuff is here and there and everywhere and probably gets consumed a little bit more easily than if it was just mounded up somewhere. All right, I think we've utilized most of the used stuff that we collected, but I still got some more things to drop in here, such as another banana peel. We saw some leftover bits of banana peels in here. Something tells me that the last feeding included banana peel too. I got a number of them in my freezer, so most feedings do include a banana peel. And I've got more coffee. It seemed to me like maybe the coffee, which to me in my bin somehow seems like a food that the worms aren't really all that drawn to for whatever reason, or I could be wrong, maybe I'm just missing the action, but I do sometimes feel like I'm coming back and finding exactly what I said I don't want to see earlier, which is a mound of stuff. So I've been mixing my coffee with other stuff, and it seemed to me like if I were to mix it with some of this flour, might as well just drop the rest of it in here, right? It seemed to me like if this flour were mixed together with the coffee, maybe even if I dropped in a little bit of crushed eggshell as grit, that seemed like it would be an interesting mix that the worms might like a little bit better than just plain old boring coffee. So I figured I'd give that a try too. This is what I see people doing, kind of blending this stuff together. And maybe we'll even grab a handful of my pre-made bedding over here. Are we doing a Bonanza level feeding here as far as the bedding goes? It almost feels like there was hardly any food items in here. Seems like everything we put in here was bedding. Alright, so this is one of the new coffee filters. What is this? Yeah, this is the other new one here. We got two new coffee filters. I don't even know what to do with them anymore. We've kind of run out of food. Got more bedding, more paper products to give them. You know what? Maybe we'll just use some of this stuff draped out across the top, sort of a top covering, sort of a landing pad for some of the moisture that collects and recirculates within the system, or at least underneath the plastic coverings. And then we'll put those cardboard toppers on here. So I think we'll be able to cover up at this point with existing materials, but I'm going to grab my bottle because I think this stuff on these two edges here could use a little squirt, so we'll do that while we're at it. I'm not sure we're going to end up with a big mound in the middle like we did last time. It seems like we'll be able to just use some of the existing material from around the bin to cover up with pretty nicely here. And we must have blended in a lot of the really dry stuff because I'm not even really finding any of the dry stuff, but I figured, you know what, if this is the surface that's gonna lose a lot of its moisture to the air, then let's just dampen stuff over there anyway. Yeah, I must have, I guess with the exception of some of it right here, a little bit of the dry stuff, most of it has been blended in for the most part already. So I don't think it'll take a whole lot. This is more of like a preemptive measure to perhaps dampen this part of the container a little bit more than it needs to. That looks pretty good to me. I don't think we need to put much more. I mean, I guess we could put more if we find the need for it elsewhere, but I don't think we will, just based on what we've seen so far. But we're gonna, in the process of covering up the feeding area, we're gonna use this as an opportunity to check the outer edges. And yeah, things look really good here. Nice and damp, nice and cozy. And as a result of that, a whole bunch of worms hanging out within the material. This stuff is still pretty rich in bedding, so it, you know, kind of acts as camouflage. If it was more, you know, rich in castings, or more higher ratio of castings and less bedding, we'd probably see the worms a little bit more easily. But yeah, you can see them. They're all over the place. They seem to like it out here. Even though that's not where I've been feeding, that's where they like to be sometimes. Maybe they were just at the feeding area and now they're just kind of cruising around and relaxing, working off the meal. Well, I mean, if you think about it, they could eat anything in this container. It doesn't have to be just the kitchen scraps and veggies and fruits and coffee and stuff like that. They can certainly make a meal out of even all the bedding, the paper and material that they live in. Doubles as their food too. The more carbon rich side of their diet. So yeah, things over there look pretty good too. Not bad. I like this little opportunity to aerate the system too a little bit while examining things. And it also lets me sort of test drive, you know, moving large amounts of the material from side to see if I've still got enough room in here to do stuff, you know. At some point I do start to feel a little bit cramped for space, and I start to ease up on feedings in the interest of leaving myself a little bit of room to get things done at some point in the future. So I guess only 10 days after our last check-in, when we made a deliberate effort to declutter the top surface of this container by removing plastic and paper coverings, now we're kind of reversing course and going big on coverings. Only because I got all this stuff left over here, stuff that just didn't happen to make it down into a lower layer of the feeding area, but next time it will for sure. By then it'll be nice and seasoned. It will have been sitting in here for a while and might have even been nibbled on a little bit, especially with all that flour that's kind of stuck to it still, that didn't shake loose. So I'm curious to see what will happen, you know, to that paper towel over time, over the next, who knows how many days it'll be till we check in here again. But it does seem like they're doing quite nicely. I definitely found some leftovers from the food they got last time, but not, you know, not an amount that would have made me worry about administering this next feeding. So 10 days was a pretty good interval. Perhaps we'll come back in a similar time span. But between then and now, I think that might be it for the mixed worm population. But then again, like I said earlier, I might be bringing a close to my time lapse, at which point I'll need to have a place to put that little group of mixed worms. So we might be back in here, not to feed, but just to let the worms that have been actively working in my time lapse container get reunited with their families. So, all right, everyone, not much left for me to do here other than put things away and get things cleaned up. But I'm not going to keep you around for that because that's boring. Before I go, though, let me really quickly say thank you. Thanks so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please remember to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go, and if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel too. All right, everyone, have a great day. Thanks so much for watching. Bye now.